Perfect. It's time to get started. We are already at 8. Hi guys, how is everyone? Very good evening. Is my voice and video clear? Type yes in the chat quickly. If you are excited for week 2, type yes in the chat quickly. We already have Jayant on the call.
Hi guys.
Hi Jayant.
Hey Om. Thanks so much for having me on here today. Looking forward to today's session on the fundamentals of DeFi.
Oh yeah. So, guys, not taking a lot of time. We are finally into week 2 where we understand fundamentals of DeFi. We have Jayant Ramanand with us, who's taking an infrastructure lead at MANTRA Dao. But what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn what is DeFi, how are DeFi and smart contracts correlated, what is the difference between traditional finance and decentralized finance, and what are the layers of DeFi, and some real world example which Jayant has worked on himself. And the final one big question to answer: how to get started with DeFi as a beginner. And Jayant has had a fair bit of experience in managing a DAO and also staking, the one concept that we have been talking a lot in last few days. So, Jayant, are we good to go? One side.
Absolutely. So just quick heads up on a little bit of housekeeping. I was wearing a striped shirt, which was causing my camera to look a little blurred. So I've just changed that up. So we're good to go at your convenience. So what I would like to start off with is that I am the staking and infrastructure lead here at MANTRA DAO. Staking, I think, is one of the most fundamental building blocks, I would say, of the crypto ecosystem when it comes to just having your tokens being secured in a particular way. The easiest comparison that might exist out there is in terms of how savings accounts exist, in that you put some money and you get an interest rate out. And crypto staking works in a similar way. So at a very high level, that's what it is. But over the course of the next hour or so, the first 45 minutes, we will run through some slides that I've prepared. Following that, we're going to go ahead and answer any questions that you might have. And throughout the entire session, as you feel that you have some questions, please feel free to use the chat box out here. Drop a comment, and I'm happy for you to drop questions while we're going on. If I do see something, or if Om sees something over here that we can address over the course of the 45 minutes, happy to do that, or happy to take your questions right at the end. So what I am going to do at this point in time is share my screen. So just give me a second while I do that. Sorry, just a second, guys.
Till the time Jayant opens up, guys, everyone who attended week 1, all the classes, type yes in the chat, or me in the chat quickly. Who attended all the sessions? Fun, very interesting. I hope it helped. A lot of people, and how many of you are active in community and engaging in all the conversations that we have? Is anybody missing out? Is anybody missing out? All of you. Interesting. Fun.
That's great. How have you found it so far, though? If you could just give me an idea as to whether you're getting a hang of the space, or whether you would like me to go a little bit more simplistically forward. So those are some things that you can look into. I'm so sorry, guys. Like technology is being difficult, and that's part of what we're going to cover over the course of this session. That when things work well, it's amazing. When things don't work so well, we seem to have issues in crypto and DeFi. So what I'm doing is I'm going to log in from a different device and then try to share my screen because I'm unable to do that from this device at the moment. Just one moment. Okay, there we go. Just let me know when you can see my screen, guys.
Yeah, the screen is visible. If you can.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. All right, perfect. So, just like all fun things, when technology works, it is absolutely fantastic. When technology doesn't work, it doesn't seem to leave a great taste in people's mouth. So, let's just get started out here and look at what why you should listen to me in the first place. I mean, there's no reason that you should be listening to me at all. But the reason I think that I have some amount of information that might be helpful is that I got into the space about 4 years ago. I've made a lot of mistakes that a lot of people in crypto are probably likely to make amongst the first few people that are getting in. Part of which goes down to how do you set up your wallets? How do you set up for information that may or may not be accessible to you? How do you set up your seed phrases? And I think that these are some of the things that you might have covered in week one. So it's gone from I have no experience about how I would want to get set up towards I have some knowledge about how wallet security works and how potentially you should look at taking care of yourself. Because one of the critical elements of the DeFi space is that you move away from a centralized entity that controls all of your information towards you owning and controlling all of your information as well. So with that responsibility comes the responsibility of making sure that you are always safe and secure in the transactions that you do. So I've also got a DeFi series called How to DeFi. So if at any point in time you wondered, how do I set up a MetaMask wallet? How do I stake? How do I do staking on different chains out there? I would highly recommend that you go check out the YouTube series, How to DeFi. If not, there's a lot of other tons of content out there. And that's one of the best things about crypto, that you don't have to start from scratch. Somebody's already done the hard work for you. So go ahead and ask questions that you might have. All right, then. So what are we going to cover, and what exactly is the future of finance, and how is it that DeFi is in existence right now? What is different now than it was 4 years ago when in the previous crypto bull run that took place? So DeFi, the word itself, is a combination of decentralized and finance. So what exactly is decentralized finance? At this point in time, let's just take a simplistic example. You have a bank. Okay, you're in India, you have a bank. Now that bank, let's talk about an Indian bank. Let's talk about ICICI, for example. I have nothing to do with ICICI. I've just picked that bank because it's top of mind. So ICICI, I have a bank account. I want to take a loan. I have to go and get approved by the bank itself. I want to set up and open an account. I need to get approved by the bank. I want to transfer money. I need ICICI to approve me. So for anything that were to take place, I need to be in a position where I can justify the transactions and the actions that I'm taking to my bank, which is a centralized authority, and all of the trust lies there. In decentralized finance, what ends up happening is that there is no central authority where the trust lies. So, which is why there is transparency, because the trust is now programmed into a blockchain. What does that mean? We'll cover that over the course of this. It is trustless in that if I no longer need to rely on a central authority to essentially be the central organization that I need to put my trust in. Because in the blockchain itself, I can see all the transactions taking place. So it's happening in a trustless manner. It's composable. What does composability mean? In traditional finance, if I have a particular product, that product lives in a silo. I can't do very much else with it. Whereas if I were to look at decentralized finance, I have the elements of staking, which starts off, which is like the basic amount of being able to set up and set up a savings account. And that's how it takes place in a non-custodial manner, in that I can go ahead and set up a staking account in a smart contract without actually having to take my funds and then put it into somebody else's control. I still control everything that is going on. So that is what I mean by non-custodial in nature. And when I say instant, in that if you've ever tried to transfer money internationally, you realize that it could take anywhere between 2 to 7 days for it to successfully take place. Whereas if you are transferring money via the DeFi network or a particular blockchain, you can do it in seconds or minutes rather. So that is the ability for near instant transactions. And whether DeFi is the future of finance or not, I think it's still fairly early on for us to be making these claims. I believe this to be true. So I would say that everything that you hear today, none of this is financial advice. This is my opinion over here, and I highly encourage all of you to disagree with it. There are particular elements of my opinion that you may not like, for example. And I would most certainly love to hear those comments in these in the chat as well, because without disagreement, I think we're not going to make the kind of progress needed for this to become mainstream going forward. So which crypto should I buy and when should I do it? Now, a lot of people reach out to me the moment they find out that I work in crypto, and they want to know where is the fastest way that they can put some money in and earn something in return for it. Now, that is the equivalent of catching a falling knife. So in the crypto market, if you try and time how things are going to work out, I will say good luck, because when you try to catch a falling knife, you're probably likely to lose a few fingers in the process. So I would say only do things with your money where you have your own conviction. So if rather than asking me what crypto should I buy, I would say follow the golden rule of all crypto, and this is applicable outside of DeFi as well, which is to do your own research. If you do your own research and you have the conviction to be able to be involved in a project and then purchase their tokens, you have the ability, or rather, you don't have the ability. You have more of a stomach for the volatility, because crypto is an extremely volatile industry. And if you aren't convinced about the actions that you're taking, you're going to end up in situations where you're not particularly happy with seeing your portfolio drop 35% in a single day. All of this has happened. So I would say, unless you have that kind of conviction, be careful about where you put your money. Okay, so that's like rule number one out of the way. I just wanted to be certain that everybody was on the same page. Do your own research. Do not try to get into get-rich-quick schemes, because the moment you try to do that, you're setting yourself up for some level of hurt. Now, what kind of hurt that is depends on the market situations, but in full disclosure, from the world of DeFi that has happened out here, I have, in the recent market downturn, also suffered from market liquidations that have taken place. So it's not like I have the answers or anything of that sort. I'm just saying that you need to be certain about how you're being set up in this ecosystem. And if you're not convinced, then you're going to have difficulties. Now that I've said that, let's move on to what I think Web3 is and where does DeFi fit into this entire ecosystem. So I believe, like, in the past week or so that you've been attending these sessions, you've gone through the process of what is Web1, what is a blockchain, what is Web2, what is Web3, how is all of this different. But before we dive into DeFi, I just thought that we'd spend maybe about a couple of minutes just here seeing if you guys have any questions, and then just laying down the groundwork so that we can go forward with this particular session on DeFi as well. So if Web1 was the read-only ecosystem, which is how a lot of the behemoths of the tech industry got started, were in the Web1 industry, where you had read-only, you could search the internet and you could read information. Web2 is where the current large tech companies have been doing fairly well, which is you have the ability to read and you have the ability to write onto a particular blockchain. And once you have this, you have the ability to interact and participate in a more social network. But the disadvantage of this entire setup of Web2 was that the entire read and write ecosystem was still managed by a centralized trusted authority, which means you don't actually own your own information. So for example, if you use Instagram and then Instagram decides to change or do away with your favorite feature. There's nothing that you can do about that because it's a centralized authority that owns it. So in order to avoid the situation of having a Web 2 like situation where you don't actually own your own information, that's where Web 3 comes in. And Web 3, one of the most critical elements of Web 3 is the crypto ecosystem and programmable money. Because if you don't have the ability to program how things are going to take place, then there is no way in which you could potentially have a read, write, and own ecosystem with a trusted central authority. So to avoid that, there are several entities out there in the Web3 ecosystem working with DeFi projects in general, trying to change the manner in which some of these activities take place. So we will go over how a couple of these blockchains work, what are the products. We will look into DeFi primitives, which is a fancy way of saying what already exists in DeFi and how can we build upon it. These are some of the things that we will go over. At any point in time, again, I want to reiterate, if you have any questions, just feel free to drop a message in the chat, and then I'm happy to pick it up over the course of this session. So let's jump into this, because over the course of this hour, what are we going to look at? We're going to look at how DeFi is transparent, how it is composable, and how it's non-custodial. And in my opinion, I think these are the three major ways in which DeFi differs from CeFi. CeFi is centralized finance, DeFi is decentralized finance. So when people talk about decentralization, it's not absolute. It's not like you have one entire ecosystem that is either decentralized or not decentralized, which basically means, I have a message from Harshika out here. Does this mean selling our data or info which we have control over? So you have the ability to control your own data. Yeah, we'll go get into this a little bit further down the line. So, like I said, decentralization is currently in its most pure form. Decentralization would look like Bitcoin mining. But the problem with decentralization and Bitcoin mining is that there is no interaction. It's an absolute proof of work game where you don't know how things are working out. And you just have to assume that everything is working in the right direction. Whereas you have centralized entities out there. So you have Binance, centralized exchanges, you have Coinbase, FTX, Huobi, any one of these out there. And the way in which these entities work is that it's only on chain, it's only behind like the ecosystem that people are looking into how your entire wallet setup and everything else works. But then the old crypto adage is that if you don't own your keys, you don't necessarily own the assets that go into it as well. So if you want to own your own assets, then decentralized way finance is the way forward. If you're okay having somebody else being the entity that you put your trust in, then centralized finance is the way. And centralized finance is just building on the existing models, whereas DeFi in general is trying to improve upon these models. So some of the logos that you see on your screen are for Uniswap. Uniswap is a decentralized exchange. Avalanche is a blockchain out there. Polygon is another blockchain, so is Solana. So you have decentralized exchanges, you have money markets. Now, what is a money market? Let's look into it a little bit more, wherein in a traditional bank, you go and then you say, I need a loan. You put up some collateral and then you get a loan against it. In DeFi, it's a similar way. So you have Aave, which is a money market. You go ahead and put some crypto collateral and then you borrow some other tokens against it. So this way, if you want to participate and add liquidity to the crypto ecosystem, but you don't want to sell your assets, you have the ability to actually be able to check that out and do that. So the promise of decentralized web. So this is what we were looking at a little bit on the previous slide as well. Sorry about that. In the decentralized web, I mentioned that there are a couple of things out there. Some of these logos might look familiar to you. You have Aave, which we were talking about. You have Binance, which is centralized. You have Bitcoin, which is again not even part of DeFi. It's just a store of value out there. And there's several of these other entities that are really setting up and doing fairly well in this ecosystem. And at some point in time, it's going to happen that all of DeFi, which currently lives in various silos, will be able to get set up in a way that that users have the ability to not only access the convenience of DeFi, but also the trustless nature of it, and actually start to build upon the slightly more nuanced elements of DeFi, which is ownership and delegation of trustlessness. So if I were to move forward now onto the next section, which is composable. Now, I just want to spend one moment on the previous slide out here, which is, let's see if it changes, which is that all of these logos that you see out here, barring Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is an entirely different blockchain, all of these essentially have the ability to interact with each other in some capacity. So if you have OpenSea, you have a MetaMask wallet, you connect to OpenSea. You have a MetaMask wallet, you can connect it to Polygon as well. Or if you have a wallet, you can buy NFTs with it. Or if you have a Binance account, you can transfer to something else, to your wallet address. Or you could even use the Aave lending protocol using your wallet. The point I'm getting at over here is that every single element of this crypto ecosystem can be used to build on top of other elements of the crypto ecosystem. So that essentially is what composable is, and that leads us into the next slide that we were looking at. Let the slide change. And essentially with composability is our entire ability for being able to build on somebody else's work. And that's the most beautiful element of DeFi, in my opinion, is that all of the code, all of the information is open source. So you don't have to trust me that I know what I'm doing with this ecosystem. You don't have to trust any of that. You can go directly to a smart contract and you can read the code and you can see what exactly is supposed to happen over there. So which goes back to trust, don't verify. Verify, don't trust. I beg your pardon. So you don't have to trust anybody. You can go onto the blockchain and verify all of this information for yourself. So which is why if you have the ability to read smart contracts and get set up for that, you have the ability to unlock the full power of crypto, which is the meme out here. And we were talking about smart contracts. I think now is a good time to just spend a couple of minutes talking about what smart contracts are exactly. So smart contracts are just a fancy term. In my opinion, smart contracts are nothing other than a series of if and then or else statements that have been strung together in a particular programming language called Solidity, which is what is used to write smart contracts on the Ethereum ecosystem. So what that means is that I have staking. What is staking as a product? Staking is the equivalent of a savings account in a particular bank. So I have a smart contract where I deposit my OM tokens. OM is the MANTRA Dao native token. So let's use that as the example. I have OM, I use that to deposit into the staking contract. Now, when I put something into a staking contract, I'm not 100% sure about how it's going to work, whether my tokens are safe or not. But in an instance like that, I have the ability to go onto the blockchain and read the smart contract and see exactly what this entire staking contract is supposed to do. If I find something that I don't agree with, I don't have to do it. Now, reading a smart contract might seem like it's one of the most difficult things you can ever do. I will say that it is a little complex to get started with, but it's all about reading in English what these if then else statements are supposed to be. So if you have not found information online, which I think is something that you should do first, is Google what is going on, do your own research, back to the first rule. If you find everything is okay, then you can trust that and go ahead, or you can read it for yourself and see how you feel. If you're reading smart contracts by yourself, I would most certainly love for you to contact me and we can probably through it together. Or I'd love to hear your thoughts on reading how any of these smart contracts actually work out. So without smart contracts, all of DeFi is rendered moot because unless you have smart contracts in place, I don't think you have the ability to actually unlock the full power of DeFi because you still have some kind of trusted intermediaries that are needed. And DeFi is all about doing away with these intermediaries, getting rid of these middlemen in the process. So this is, I mean, I'll share the link with anybody that's interested out there. This is a fairly advanced section of what might be going on in terms of the DeFi ecosystem. We don't need to touch upon it right now. So I'm going to skip ahead to the non-custodial nature of how things actually work out. So when we're looking at custodial versus non-custodial, all of DeFi, and we looked at this very briefly before, all of DeFi is about non-custodial finance. So what does non-custodial and custodial finance even mean? So let's take a step back. Let's first look at what is custodial versus non-custodial as just a concept. So let's say that you have cash that you have at some point in you have rupees in your house in your hand, or dollars in your house in your hand. Now you have custody of those dollars or those rupees. So that means that you have complete control over them, and you have the ability to do whatever it is out there that you wish to do with this particular set of money. Similarly, you could have a set of tokens out there, right? So now, if I have it in my hand and I have the ability to control it, then that is my right to be able to deploy the funds in any particular way that I might feel fit. Whereas if the money was sitting in a bank account, now notionally meaning that it's in my name, but I don't actually see this amount of money anywhere. So that would be custodial versus non-custodial, wherein I have access and control over the money, whereas somebody else has access and control of the money, but I have ownership of it. So if I have it at ICICI, using the same bank example, it's custodial, versus if I have it in my hand, it's non-custodial. Whereas if I have crypto, for example, in a centralized exchange, now like Binance, so Binance controls the keys to that particular exchange. Binance has the ability to stop withdrawals or start withdrawals should it choose to. So in instances like that, that means that if Binance at some point in time decides to stop withdrawals because they were insolvent, I'm not saying that Binance is, I'm just using it as an example here. But if they were to say that, then I would not have the ability to get my funds back, even though on paper it belongs to me. Whereas in the DeFi ecosystem, say I have a MetaMask wallet, which is what I use to access the DeFi, unlock DeFi. So if I have it on a MetaMask wallet, I will forever have control of my tokens, and I will forever have the ability to control what happens with my funds. There's nobody else that has the ability to tell me whether these what I can and cannot do with these tokens. And I think that plays a critical role, in my opinion, in the DeFi ecosystem, in just being able to control how your money works and what it does for you. So one of the things that we've looked at so far has been centralized versus decentralized, custodial versus non-custodial. I think now is a good time to just take a step back and look at what I mean in all of the various aspects of the DeFi ecosystem, because some of you may be familiar with traditional finance, but not so much with DeFi. So some of these names might look new to you, but on the left-hand side is traditional finance and what exactly it does across the various sectors. And on the right-hand side, you have the equivalent DeFi products out there and what they do and how they might be slightly different in the manner in which that they achieve what they are doing out there. So if I were to spend some time out here, let's look at let's run through all of these out here. And if you have any questions, happy to take those. Now you have centralized money. Now centralized money is everything that we know right now. The US dollar is centralized, the Indian rupee is, so is the euro, because it's controlled by a central authority that lends value and trust to a particular currency out there. So in institutions like this, for the US dollar, I would rely on the Fed. For the Indian rupee, I would rely on the RBI. And whatever they say is true is what all of us would believe to be true. Now, in the crypto ecosystem, you have Bitcoin, you have DAI, you have stable coins. What happens is that none of us have to believe that Bitcoin is, none of us have to believe or look to somebody else for their opinion that Bitcoin is safe or that DAI is safe. I can look at the code. I'm either convinced by what's happening over there or I'm not. But I don't necessarily need to rely on somebody else to tell me that, yeah, Bitcoin is a safe currency. If you believe in it, great. If not, you don't have to. It's all written in code, so we don't have to worry about it. So we looked at money and we looked at central banks. If we were to look at commercial banking at this point in time, just earlier in the presentation, I spoke about how Aave is a lending protocol. And what is a lending protocol? Most traditional banks are lending protocols, because what do? They take money from people, they pay a small interest rate on it. They use that money and they redeploy that capital in the way that they see fit, and they charge interest on it. So that difference between the interest being paid to people that are supplying the cash versus the people that are the people that are borrowing the cash and paying the interest rate, the difference between those two is where the banks make money. Now, I currently live in Hong Kong, and that's where I'm based at the moment. HSBC is a huge bank. HSBC is a huge bank out here, and what they end up doing is that they have tens of thousands of employees currently working in Hong Kong right now, I believe, alone, which essentially are trying to do all of these transactions, which is take the money from people, pay them an interest rate, and then lend the money out and get paid an interest rate. But because all of this happens in the real world, what tends to take place is that there is a great operationally intensive process behind it, because it takes a team of tens of thousands of people to be able to facilitate all of these transactions. Now, what if you had the ability to write down in a smart contract code, and just before you launch the code, you sort out all of the logic? I saw a couple of questions up there. You have all of the logic in place that is verifiable and acceptable to you and all of the users out there. You put it out there. Everybody has the ability to interact with that smart contract. So I put money into it. I get paid an interest rate. I take money out of it. I pay an interest rate for it. I'm able to do all of this. And what would have taken in the traditional finance world, tens of thousands of people sitting behind computer screens, making all of this possible. All of it is possible in a transparent, trustless way using code itself. And that is where Aave thrives. So Aave is this little ghost thing out here. So Aave thrives. There's MakerDAO, which also is doing extremely well in terms of their ability to be robust in the DeFi ecosystem. One thing I want to touch upon in terms of recent events that have taken place, there has been a crypto downturn, I guess, since the 10th of May when Luna essentially capitulated. So Luna is a decentralized, was a decentralized stablecoin. USD was a decentralized stablecoin backed by Luna. At one point in time, it was doing extremely well, had a lot of money in it. When that entire ecosystem collapsed, it took tens of billions of dollars of value with it, and Luna went down to zero. So that's an example of how we take the promise of a great protocol out there, and by not being able to deliver on it, people essentially tend to lose a lot of money. And this is a great moment for me to stop and say, I too held Luna, and I was liquidated on the morning of the 10th of May because the token price went down. And I bought into it. But then every time I feel bad about having lost any money at any point in time, I realized that there are the likes of Three Arrows Capital, which not just lost their own money, but lost billions of dollars of other people's money. Now, the reason I bring this up is that Three Arrows Capital, for example, is a centralized authority. I mean, it's a lending it's nothing. It's a hedge fund that takes money from other people and then puts it away. What ended up happening was because they took a lot of money in a CFI, in a centralized finance way, they borrowed a lot of money, deployed it various places, don't have the ability to pay back, and then that's causing a cascading effect across all of DeFi. Whereas when Luna collapsed, it was entirely in the DeFi ecosystem, and Luna went down and took down several other token prices with it. But the robustness of DeFi and its ability to not actually bring down the entire industry or require bailouts, that is what was able to actually make them succeed in this entire ecosystem. That DeFi could potentially be a way forward, but there's still a long way to go because we're still learning how each of these things take place. And the manner in which this fail fast methodology takes place is what's happening right now in the DeFi ecosystem. We haven't finalized how things are going to happen or what the best way forward is. But with every new experiment comes some sort of change that we need to be prepared for. So one thing that I want to look at next is just on this chart is that you have centralized and decentralized, right? So a centralized version of an exchange, for example, is Binance. I don't know what your preferred exchange is, but then Binance is fairly popular. So let's look at that. So in an exchange like Binance, they own and operate all of the funds. You just have KYC, and it's what I like to call the Web 2 mullet. So on the front end, it looks like crypto and everything else that's going on. But at the back end, it's exactly like every other Web 2 company out there. You don't actually own any of the information. You're a participant in somebody else's ecosystem, which is why you have Binance on one side and you have Uniswap on the other side. So Uniswap is one of the earlier. It's basically one of the OGs in the crypto ecosystem, which allows you to, in a decentralized way, launch token pools, launch liquidity pools, and be able to trade against those pools without any centralized trusted authority being a part of the ecosystem. So with that, we've got money, central banking, exchanges, and several other things that are covered already that we were looking into. But I think one of the most critical elements that does tend to get forgotten while we're in this pursuit of innovation is that despite all of the promise that DeFi has at this point, right? One thing that people keep looking at, and this is what a lot of traditional finance uses as a stick to beat DeFi with, is that there's a lot of uncertainty. And I will be the first person to say that DeFi is in no way in its final avatar of what it's supposed to be. It's an ecosystem that at present is still evolving, and which is why the more interest that it gets, the faster it evolves, because there are more people on it. And in the DeFi world, nobody's necessarily looking at how they can benefit themselves over everybody else. It's about how the community can benefit over everybody else. And to me, that is one of the themes that I think I appreciate the most. But having said that, let's just look at some of what the headwinds for adoption are. Now, DeFi right now exists in the blockchain world. For most people out there, unlike yourselves, who are very, very progressive and understanding in your ability to want to learn, most people out there don't know what a blockchain is, let alone what DeFi is. None of the people out there have ever set up a MetaMask wallet or even want to set up a MetaMask wallet. So it just comes down to where a world of 7 billion users, DeFi has the ability to overcome all of these geographical boundaries and become this unified ecosystem wherein global markets are easily enabled. But for us to be able to get there, there is still a significant period of time for us to go in how we actually get set up and deliver on the promise. Because out of the 7 billion people of the world, there's about a couple of million active users a month on Ethereum. And Ethereum is one of the most popular blockchains out there. So if even the most popular blockchain can barely hit 7 digits, 8 digits in terms of daily users, the rest of the world has a long way to go. So one of the biggest headwinds for adoption of DeFi is the lack of usability. So I've been a user of this ecosystem for the last 4 years, and I can tell you that the user experience is not what keeps bringing me back to it, because there's a lot of improvement that could be done over there. What does keep bringing me back are the values. So one of the things that I have mentioned in the past is that whenever somebody enters the crypto ecosystem or the Web3 ecosystem, there are 3 reasons why anybody would want to enter. It's the technology, the values, or the money. So with the technology, you would say, hey, blockchain is cool. I'm going to go do something in the blockchain space. And you're probably going to be a dev of some kind that really wants to explore how trustless smart contracts might work. If you're in it for the values, then you believe that decentralization is a fundamental human right, for example. I think it is, because you have the ability to own and access your own information. So the values could be that decentralization is the way forward. We don't want a trusted entity because entities can be corrupted, whereas code cannot. So to avoid the corruption of entities, let's look at the values of DeFi and what it brings in. And the third reason and the third set of people are the ones that come in for the money. Now, when we had a bull market going, there was a lot of people entering the space that wanted to do it just because there was a quick flip money-making opportunity on their NFT, on some new token project, on anything out there. But the thing that happened is, like, when the markets went down, the ones that were in it for the money probably left with all of that, all of the hype as well. And when people leave, when the hype train has left and only the real builders are left behind, you can be certain that there is a lot of next generation primitives, DeFi primitives that are being built out that are potentially going to change how we do a lot of the things that we do right now. So the headwinds for adoption are also the tailwinds for innovation. So if that makes sense, that's the direction that we are heading in. And guys, with that, I have my slides that are complete, and I am more than happy to hop across and take some questions now. So I've seen, just looking through this. Should I write code, or how should I start creating blockchain or DeFi system? Though I understand the concept, I'm not sure and don't know how to build a system of my own. Okay. All right. So this is a question that has come in from Lakshmanan. And you're trying to ask, how do I build a DeFi ecosystem? I think the question that you should be looking to answer, Lakshman, is instead of building a DeFi ecosystem, because how does one build an entire ecosystem? You can only contribute to a part of it. You don't have to try and build everything from scratch. So maybe the question to ask is, how would you take a look at what is the biggest pain point you have right now, and how do you solve for that? Because the process of how you create products and change it and change how broken systems work has not changed anyway. You're still trying to solve a problem. So rather than try to create an ecosystem, how about you try and create a solution to what you think is the biggest problem at this point in time? And that's actually something I would love to know, that anybody that has used the crypto ecosystem, what have you found to be, and you can leave a comment in the chat, what have you found to be the best part about using it, or what have you found to be the biggest source of friction in using this entire ecosystem? And yeah. Hey, Om, can you help me out with the questions? I'm just trying to open up this. Yeah.
Sure. Just give me one quick second. We have some questions that I see.
Absolutely.
Just one quick second. I'm just opening it up.
So what I'm going to do is, guys, this is my favorite slide out here. So I would just spend time, if you have access to it, or I don't know, do we give them access to the links and the slides and stuff as well?
Yeah, we probably get them after the session as the recordings.
Okay. Okay, great. So what I think, guys, would be extremely helpful from a learning perspective is just spend time on this slide and take a look at all of the icons that you have seen on the right-hand side, and then look that up, because I think that is going to be extremely helpful. And what I think is another part for it to be fairly helpful is if you take a look at all of the issues that we're looking at in terms of the DeFi ecosystem and all of the issues between Web 2 and Web 3. So I think if you start taking a look at that a little bit more in detail and just understanding and dissecting what each of these protocols means, I think that would be extremely helpful. So I have some questions here. Yeah.
Sure. There are a few questions.
We will share the link.
There are some questions which we have got from people, and I've shortlisted a few of them, which are the interesting ones of DeFi. Very first question comes from Anshul Sharma. He says that the current system, which is centralized finance, is stable when it comes to quick payments and regulations, compliance, and works overall great. DeFi lacks these key features and has its own issues like expensive transaction cost. Then instead of improving centralized finance further, why do we switch to completely new system?
Oh, okay. So is the question whether should we switch and change the existing system, or should we move to a brand new system out there? Did I understand the question correct?
Yeah. So basically, why don't we improve the existing system that we have, and or why do we shift to DeFi?
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So this is from Anshul, right? So Anshul, let me ask you one thing. Now, there is a system out there, and this is probably food for thought, right? So there's an entire ecosystem out there that is fundamentally broken, in that you can try and fix it. You can try and say that we know how to control inflation. We know how all of these things work. We know how macroeconomic factors work. Trust me, don't go and verify anything else out there. But trust me, everything is going to be fine. Now, if someone walks up to me and tells me this from a centralized authority, that I should just trust them with my money, and once every decade, which has happened like clockwork, there is a recession, there is a monetary crisis, there is something that happens out there. At what point in time do I stop trusting the central authority? At what point in time do I stop trusting that this centralized agency has my best interest at heart rather than its own best interest at heart? Because the centralized agency is also a player, an actor in this ecosystem. So that's a centralized, like, let's say the Reserve Bank of India has its own agenda out there. I'm not criticizing anyone, but I'm just saying it's an entity in this ecosystem with its own wants and desires, and it's going to be acting for its own benefit. So if you are an agency or an entity within this entire ecosystem, how is it that you are protecting your own interests, or who is looking out for your own interests out there? Is there anybody? A lot of times, I think people mistake the common good for individual good. Now, shouldn't the people have the ability to decide what is good for them themselves? So I think, to your question, the centralized agencies out there have been working in a particular way, and it works in that there is oversight. You're right. There is a lot of things in DeFi that still require improvement. But then there are also a lot of things in centralized finance that can never be improved upon. How do you work to improve upon a lack of agency over decision making that is taking place? So I think for this fundamental reason, I think that is enough for it to propel people towards wanting to control and access their own information. And I think that is why DeFi is the next step forward. Is it going to happen next year? I doubt it. we've got a long way to go. So the fact that on a Saturday night you're here listening to something about the fundamentals of DeFi, I can be certain that the builders of the next age of the future of finance and how it's going to improve upon and change are probably on this call right now. So if it doesn't exist just yet, but we most certainly have the ability to build towards this utopian environment that we're thinking about. So I hope that answers your question.
And also, Jayant, that begs one more question at the same point, which is asked by Pranjal also, that what exactly is a DeFi infrastructure when a lot of these apps are built on top of Web2 infrastructure?
Yep.
How does that look like? Or
so,
yeah.
Yep, that's actually a great question from Pranjal, because one of the things, and so staking is one part of my job, infrastructure is the other part of my job. So thank you for asking that question. So essentially in the Web3 ecosystem, you have, if I give you the example of how Web 1, 2, 3 is, so it's read, right? But then another way to look at it is Web 1 is electricity, Web 2 is internet, Web 3 is ownership. Okay. So you have electricity, which is how everything else works. Like without electricity, we don't have servers, we don't have cloud computing, we have nothing happening. You have Web 2, which is you have the internet that runs on top of all of these things. And you have Web 3, which is going back to the point that we have composability. It uses a lot of the centralized infrastructure, but it uses that to be able to decentralize databases. So if I were to just take a step back and say, what is a blockchain? There's a lot of complex jargon I can throw at you, but in simple speak, in my opinion, a blockchain is nothing but a database. So how you run that database and what kind of setup it runs on, each database is going to work slightly differently. The fact that you have validators and proof of stake and proof of work, and there's an entire set that we're looking at in terms of decentralization. So proof of stake means there are validators out there. A validator verifies whether the transactions are correct or not. So that a validator acts as the fundamental truth bearer in the Web3 ecosystem. Now, these validators run on AWS, cloud computing. A lot of newer validators that are trying to do best practices run on bare metal servers, meaning that they don't rely on third-party Web2 entities. They've set up from scratch. So if you think about it, you probably have somebody in the middle of Norway that set up like a mining farm just to run data centers off the grid entirely. So that I would say, in my opinion, does not rely on Web 2 infrastructure. That is creating like its own Web 2.5 infrastructure out there. So yeah, that is, despite everything else, we're still a part of the ecosystem that we have been building out. So we would still rely on the internet. We're not saying internet is bad. We're not saying centralized agencies are bad. We're just saying that there are the ability to build upon and evolve how we're working on things here.
Got it. And and also that begs one more, just building on top of that. Also, that's a question by Shubham Bansal. Why we cannot change smart contracts once it's created, and if there are any changes, for example, in future we need to make, how do we do that if not that way?
Okay. Okay. So a smart contract is think of a verbal agreement. Okay. So Om, you and I make a verbal agreement that we're going to do this how to DeFi and the fundamentals of DeFi session. We don't have it codified anywhere. Now, before the session, I just don't turn up for it. Now, that's a verbal agreement that we have an agreement in place, but there's no way to enforce it because how are you going to enforce it? I live in Hong Kong. What are you going to do? Right. So this is a very basic way of looking at it. Now, say that there is a smart contract that you and I have entered into, and then I have put, and then you said that if you're going to do the session, you have to put $500 into this smart contract. Otherwise, you're not eligible. So I say, okay, if I put $500 in, if I don't show up for the session, then that $500, it belongs to you. So for the inconvenience of having gone through the process and not having a speaker show up, you have $500. Whereas the speaker loses $500 for not following through on that commitment. Now, example, you set up the smart contract and suddenly halfway through the smart contract, let's just assume you can change it. Instead of $500, you say that I have to now put in $1,000. Randomly, you change this by yourself. So how do I know whether this is accurate or not? And hasn't the terms of our agreement changed? That's one of the reasons why smart contracts, once they're deployed, they cannot be changed. Because once you change a smart contract, you're essentially changing the entire agreement that you had entered into. And agreements cannot be changed unilaterally. So whenever people have smart contract changes that need to take place, what happens is that they can't just change the contract. They have to migrate. So you have to move from one agreement to the next agreement. And that's a lot of user friction out there. Like people don't like doing this because essentially they have a lot of work that they have to do. You have to go, you have to unstake, you have to pay some money to write on the on the blockchain. You have to go back and do it, which is why whenever you write a smart contract, you're essentially front loading all of the thought processes and all of the unintended consequences that could come up. And how are you going to cater for all of these things? Because to change smart contracts is basically the equivalent of saying, go change employment agreements every 3 months. So it's fine, but it's an extremely tedious process if you wanted to go through that. And I don't think anybody really wants to do that. So that's how I would look at smart contracts and why you can't change it. Having said that, I would say that there are certain smart contracts out there that could be changed. For the more technically open people, I would say look at what proxy implementations are, wherein you can generate a smart contract on behalf of another contract. And then the user knows that some certain parameters in that contract could change. So interest rates could change, etc. So you're adding flexibility without changing the entire terms of the agreement as well. So that's something that you can take a look at.
Got it. And for example, and this is by Shreyansh. If I'm building something that's on DeFi or on blockchain, what are the points to consider for choosing the right chain? Do I go with Ethereum, Solana, or what are these checklist basically items that I should look at?
That's a great question, actually. I think when you're looking to see what chain to build on, there are so many factors. I don't think I can actually cover every single one of them. But I think the most critical thing is what chain mimics your values the most as a builder. Okay. So every blockchain out there has slightly different features to other blockchains. So if you're building on Ethereum, you probably believe in like the decentralized future in a particular way, and then it's all going to be Ethereum maxis out there. But Ethereum is extremely expensive. So it's dated technology. They're trying to change that with proof of stake. So you might not want to do it because you're trying to build a mass consumer product, which Ethereum cannot scale to. Or say, for example, that you're a person that is building something in the exotic derivatives or financial market, and you want to do it somewhere where transactions can be confirmed in mere seconds as opposed to minutes like it takes on Ethereum. So then you might pick Solana, for example, because Solana is a fairly quick blockchain when it comes to mining new transactions. Or you come up with something where it's not time, or it's not transactions, it's the money and the cost that you want to save. So in cases like that, then Polygon might be an extremely great blockchain that you might want to work on because it's relatively cheap It's less than a couple of cents to do transactions out there. So I would say that the blockchain you pick to build on depends on the use case that you're trying to solve for. Because every single let's take a step back also, right? So if all blockchains are like databases, every single type of problem requires a slightly different database for you to store the information on. So what is the problem you're solving for, and what is the database that could serve the purpose that you're trying to solve for? I'd say if you look at it that way, then that might help you determine which chain you want to build on a little bit more.
Got it. Jan, there are last two questions. I'll lay out to you both together. One is that if the middleman is, let's say, not there, probably in the blockchain ecosystem, how is the customer support, or let's say the support function works, if it does? And when we can end a conversation with how to transition to DeFi, some resources that we could look at, and as a beginner, what are the things that I should, how should my path look like if I want to transition, let's say, to build one of the DeFi platforms?
Okay, so what is the customer experience like in DeFi, and how do people solve for it? I think that's a fantastic question, because that is one of the biggest hindrances in the DeFi space. So at Mantra, where we currently run a whole suite of DeFi products, a lot of users are using our protocols for the first time, or probably the first time they've ever used a staking app out there. So what tends to happen is that we still have a customer service side to it, because as far as I'm concerned, this is what I tell everybody that's working full-time at a DAO or in the world of DeFi. Your boss is not whoever you're reporting to. Your boss is your community. So if your community has a problem, you have a problem, which means that Telegram, Discord, Twitter, wherever people are reporting these problems, it is your problem to solve. So I would say that from the customer service experience, there is a lot to sort out, because it's not a customer service experience alone. It's an industry evolution experience that we're trying to sort out. So I'll be honest, I have not had the best customer service experience myself, but as an operator of the DeFi ecosystem, we have our customer service team that is set up to specifically solve beginner issues, how to set up wallets, how they might go about doing that, educating people on how to keep safe, because security is the most important part. When you are your own bank, it is your responsibility to keep your own assets safe. And this is a mindset change that needs to happen. So that's what we do, spending time educating our customer service executives in educating our users. So that's one element to it. Could you just say what the second question was again, just quickly?
So second question, as we have a lot of beginner folks here, how do I look at DeFi? What's the point that I should start from, and what some pathway that we could set for ourselves to become
perfect. So I think the fastest path to becoming an expert in DeFi, and this industry is all of 2 years old, so you still have the ability to be like one of the earliest people out there. The fastest way is put some money into a wallet and then go interact with a smart contract. Without skin in the game, there is no way that you actually are going to understand how any of this ecosystem works. And you're not going to understand what you know and what you don't know until you actually go and do it. If you, in the course of doing some transactions, make a few mistakes, send tokens to the wrong address, I wouldn't call that money lost. I would call that the cost of learning, because learning about DeFi, you're not going to get from attending any university with a degree at the end of it. It's not going to happen in that way, because the industry changes by the minute. So you're going to have somebody that is within this ecosystem keeping up with that change. And traditional education institutions don't keep up with that change. So I would say, don't spend time on like fancy degrees and 4-year courses and the likes of that, trying to learn about DeFi. Take a couple of hundred rupees, dollars, whatever it is that you feel like are okay losing, put it into a wallet, go interact with some smart contracts out there, make all the mistakes that you can. At the end of it, you're probably going to become an expert on it, and we're going to have another builder that probably is going to come up with new solutions. So go ahead, do that. Fastest way is go check out YouTube videos. There is an amazing setup that you can go and use over there. How to DeFi is my series on how to get set up with any of this ecosystem. So go to Mantra Dao, go to YouTube, check out how to set up a MetaMask wallet, how to stake. If you have questions, you can shoot me a message on Twitter, LinkedIn, Discord, wherever. I'm everywhere. So let me know, guys, if there are other questions that you have. But I had a great time. Thanks so much, Om, for helping to set this up today.
Perfect. I think people loved it. Coming from a very deep understanding of the things that we already are juggling around in the community on the calls, and I think that is it for today. That is it for today. Thank you.
Awesome.
And just 1 second, I'll just drop a link for the feedback so that we keep on improving, just as the world of Web3. Thank you so much,
Awesome,
folks.
guys.
Thank you for attending this session. 121 people, everyone who got the time and attended the call. Please leave us some feedback on the form that is presented. I hope it was wonderful. Week 2 has started with a very interesting note, with Jayant explaining us a lot about DeFi. DeFi, Jayant, sorry, any last words to the community who is looking at DeFi, as a builders and also executioners of Web3?
I think the only thing I would love to say is that if I said this before, but if you're here on a Saturday night looking to learn more about DeFi, I can be 100% certain that the future of DeFi is going to be very bright, because you guys on this call and just generally getting into the space are the ones that are going to be builders for the future. And I can't wait to see what everyone else is up to, because in this space, there's nobody that's an expert. We're all learning as we go along. So if you find something that's interesting, I would love for you to share it with me as well, because I love to learn and consume information. So send as much of it my way as well.
Got it. Thank you so much, Jan. Once again, probably I'll shoot you some of the activities that we are doing also, so you can guide some people as well. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I hope you have a very good
Thanks so
night.
much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Get this.
Thanks so much.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Jan. Thanks for thanks for doing this for all of us. And guys, we'll see you for the next session.
Absolutely.
Let's jump on to the community hangouts now. We'll see you inside Discord. That's for the day. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jan, once again.
Thanks, guys.